Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the True North Report. My name is Andrew Lawton, with you for the next half hour here, a fellow with True North. And we have a very interesting story that is likely to probably have a few changes by the time we finish this today. So we'll try to keep tabs on things. I've got like a bunch of different screens open. I've got my phone out. I've got a bunch of people that will probably tell me if something changes. But the fact of the matter is the SNC-Lavalin scandal has been pretty rapidly changing, and not the scandal itself, but the Liberal government's response to it. I think in the last, however long this has been going on now, 11 days since the initial Globe and Mail report, Justin Trudeau has gone through pretty much 11 different versions of the Prime Minister's response to this and the Prime Minister's office's response to this. And that's been the most interesting thing to watch about all of this, is that the way Justin Trudeau keeps moving the goalposts is not the way that someone who is innocent of those initial allegations would respond to a situation like this. Because remember, when the first story broke, that Globe and Mail report that said Jody Wilson-Raybould was pressured by someone in the Prime Minister's office to drop the prosecution of SNC-Lavalin, the first response from Justin Trudeau was that one line that we heard on repeat, said over and over and over again until the tape breaks. And that is that neither Trudeau nor anyone in his office directed Wilson-Raybould to take any action in the SNC-Lavalin prosecution. Okay. And then in question period later that day, David Lametti, the new Attorney General, said over and over again until the tape broke that neither Trudeau nor anyone in the Prime Minister's office directed Wilson-Raybould or Lametti to take any action. But then we saw the goalposts start to shift pretty quickly. Then it became, well, I didn't know of anything. And then all of a sudden it was about throwing Wilson-Raybould under the bus, saying, okay, well, if it did happen, she should have told us. And then we started to hear different explanations about why Jody Wilson-Raybould was actually demoted from Attorney General to Veterans Affairs Minister. And there were some fun ones here. We had the belief that, okay, some people just said she was a bad minister. The Anthony Housefather excuse was my favorite. He said, well, she didn't speak French. And he then said, oh, I didn't know. I was just musing about possibilities, which is always great when the chair of the Justice Committee does a radio interview and just starts wildly speculating. And then when called on it, has to say, oh, well, no, I was just thinking of, ways that maybe we could explain this. The chair of the Justice Committee just, makes things up for the heck of it. And then he backs away from that. So then Trudeau gets in and said that, no, we only had to move her because Scott Bryson resigned. And I don't know if you saw this on Twitter, but there was a great hashtag game going on. I think it was like hashtag because Scott Bryson resigned or something. And it was a bunch of people, including many MPs, just seeing what else they could pin on Scott Bryson. And I'm pretty sure that by the end of it all, Scott Bryson was responsible for the Halifax explosion and Jersey Shore. And I believe that those two were probably opposite ends of the spectrum for things that Scott Bryson has been blamed for. Although, interestingly enough, Scott Bryson, who's now working in the private sector, his husband tweeted, don't worry, I blame my husband for everything as well. So I think that the Bryson family was clearly thinking this was a bit absurd as well. But again, one of Justin Trudeau's latest excuses in the whole Jody Wilson-Raybould SNC-Lavalin thing. And then we've had throughout all of this, though, a consistent defense of the Prime Minister's office's conduct from the Prime Minister's office. And that's that, no, we never did what we're being accused of doing. Or at least we never did it in the way or in the manner that we're being accused of doing it. And a lot of that changed, or I would say that we have enough reason to think it's changed with the resignation yesterday of Gerald Butts. Now, yesterday was a holiday in Ontario. It was a holiday, I think, in a couple of places as well. Family Day is like a different Monday, depending on where you are. It's a stupid holiday, but it is what it is. But Gerald Butts, on what he knows is a holiday for a lot of people, sends out a statement, and in the statement admits that he has resigned as the principal secretary to Justin Trudeau, and the Prime Minister has accepted his resignation. Now, normally when there is a big scandal and someone resigns in the midst of that scandal, it's because they're the person that the government is putting the blame on, or they're the person who actually deserves the blame. But the person who leaves, generally speaking, becomes the face of the scandal. And I want to read for you Gerald Butts' resignation letter. The letter that he sent that was posted, or the statement that he sent that was posted, by the way, not even by him, it was posted by Kate Purchase, who is the communications director for Trudeau, and then it was also posted by Trudeau himself. Just pulling it up here. All right. I have resigned as Principal Secretary to the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, PC MP, Prime Minister of Canada. He has accepted my resignation. Recently, anonymous sources have alleged that I pressured the former Attorney General, the Honourable Jody Wilson-Raybould, to assist SNC-Lavalin with being considered for a deferred prosecution agreement. I categorically deny the accusation that I or anyone else in his office pressured Ms. Wilson-Raybould. We honored the unique role of the Attorney General. At all times, I and those around me acted with integrity and a singular focus on the best interests of all Canadians. The Prime Minister of Canada's office is much larger and more important than any of its staff. I have served it to the best of my abilities, and I have at all times given the Prime Minister free and unfettered advice. I have served the public interest, not the interest of any individual or any narrow private interest of any kind at any time. Life is full of uncertainties, but I am absolutely certain of that. Any accusation that I or the staff put pressure on the Attorney General is simply not true. Canadians are rightly proud of their public institutions. They should be, because they work. But the fact that this allegation exists, it cannot and should not take one moment away from the vital work the Prime Minister and his office are doing for all Canadians. My reputation is my responsibility, and that is for me to defend. It is in the best interest of the office, and it's important work for me to step away. I want to say a word about my relationship with Ms. Wilson-Raybould. I encouraged her to run for the Liberal Party of Canada and worked hard to support her as a candidate and then cabinet minister. From my perspective, our relationship has always been defined by mutual respect, candor, and an honest desire to work together. Then there's a paragraph about his gratitude to the Prime Minister, a paragraph about climate change, because why the hell not? And then all of a sudden about the good, hardworking people in Canada's public service and elected office and yada, yada, yada. So I just want to make a point here. He's resigned, and there are how many paragraphs? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 paragraphs in this response. And one of them is just what we call in the journalism biz here the lead. And that's I've resigned and he's accepted the resignation, which is a good lead, by the way, because it adequately sums up that Butts is out. But of the 8 paragraphs, we've got 3 of them just thanking people. We've got one of them talking about how great his relationship with Jody Wilson-Raybould is. We've got one of them about the scandal itself or the accusations of it. And then you've got, I guess 2, we'll say 2 on that, and 1 on climate change. And, you know, of this, his resignation, which is supposedly in response to SNC-Lavalin, pretty much has nothing to do with SNC-Lavalin. And more importantly, he has not in this anywhere acknowledged that anything he did has been done incorrectly. So Gerald Butts resigns in the wake of a scandal, insists that he did none of the things that he's accused of doing or that the office is accused of doing. Trudeau insists that he's not done any of the things he's accused of doing or his office is accused of doing. All of the people in the government say that the allegations are false, and Gerald Butts still resigns. And then in the wake of the resignation of Gerald Butts, everyone in the government, including Trudeau, is tweeting about how great Gerald Butts is. So if the guy is so great and he did nothing wrong, why on earth is he resigning? And the point that I think needs to be made here is that there's a tendency in crisis communications for whenever a scandal happens to someone resigns. Someone falls on the sword. Someone takes the blame. Maybe it's their fault. Maybe it's not. Maybe they had a small role. Maybe they were the architect of it. But the point of these public resignations is that they give the public assurances that the person who let X happen, in this case, the allegations of a nasty relationship between the Prime Minister's office and the Attorney General's office, that these things will not happen again because the people responsible are gone. Gerald Butts seems to think that the sole purpose of a public resignation is just to make the public happy, that it's just to pacify any concerns and not to serve any real purpose about the substance of it. And, when people say heads are going to roll over this, what they want is for the person who's responsible to be gone or to be brought to justice. Remember, there's an ethics investigation, a fifth ethics investigation for Trudeau underway because of this. But he's saying, I did nothing wrong, but, just someone saying it means that I've got to step aside. Well, how noble of you. And, I don't particularly have a lot of respect for Gerry Butts as an individual. I think as a political operator, he's clearly a smart guy, but we're talking about Canada's highest paid Twitter troll here. He just, sits around all day and just, retweets and slanders and smears and all of this stuff, which is fine. You know what? If that's the best use of a principal secretary to a prime minister, then have at it, Gerald Butts. He'll have more time for Twitter now that he's no longer working for Justin Trudeau. But the fact that he has resigned while saying that he has nothing to do with anything means that, okay, two things are possible. Number one, all that the Prime Minister's office has been saying, that none of this happened, is accurate, so he shouldn't have resigned, or someone else is responsible, in which case he shouldn't have resigned. The only reason he would resign is if he is trying to draw attention away from what's happening, or if he actually was the one responsible. And I think there's enough to say that it's the former, because if he did do what that Globe and Mail report said someone in the Prime Minister's office did, we wouldn't be seeing these glowing tributes from the people whose employ he just left. And my goodness, this is such a backwards way of thinking for the Prime Minister's office that this is going to make it all go away. Because in all honesty, when the PMO has been for the last week and a bit insisting time and time again, did nothing wrong, didn't happen, reports are false, even though Canadians were calling BS on it, it was at least a relatively consistent message. I mean, who they blamed for the leaks and the relationship between Wilson-Raybould and the PMO, that all changed. But the core idea didn't change, which is that, you know what, this did not happen the way it's being discussed here. Okay, so let's talk about that for a moment, because if that was in fact the case, no one should have resigned. They should be coming out swinging and saying, we're going to fight this fake news. We're going to, swat at this false allegation. We're going to stand up for truth. We're going to release the gag that's on Jody Wilson-Raybould now. Let her speak without the attorney-client privilege present. And we're going to let this air out. But that hasn't happened. They've continued to gag Jody Wilson-Raybould. And I mean that metaphorically, not in the women's violence way that the Toronto Star or a National Post columnist got into hot water over. But what we have happening here is this monumental, I won't use that word, but a cluster you-know-what going on when they're simultaneously having someone take responsibility and leave while saying that there's nothing that needs to be claimed responsibility for. Liberal logic for you, right? But here's where we honestly have to question whether Jody Wilson-Raybould is as squeaky clean in this as we might like. And I'm very hesitant to make this about her, because right now it does genuinely seem as though she is the victim. But today it's looking like things are changing a little bit. And I say this for two reasons. Number one, she's remained in the Liberal caucus. Unless there had been any doubt about that, she affirmed it today. She did a brief scrum with reporters, and she said, yes, I am a Liberal member of Parliament. Not only a Liberal MP, but if you watched in question period today, and other people pointed this out as well, she was a Liberal MP sitting not where the backbenchers sit, but sitting pretty much near where the ministers sit. Not in her seat that she had. So it's not like they just haven't gotten around to switching out the seats. She was sitting basically with cabinet ministers and not with the backbenchers. So she is still at least in the circle in some way, which is certainly a relevant piece of this. But the big part is she had a meeting with cabinet today. Apparently she requested it. This is what Trudeau said. The Prime Minister said that Jody Wilson-Raybould requested the opportunity to meet with cabinet. That meeting happened today because of her request, the Prime Minister is saying. And then they had this meeting. It can't be divulged what happened in it because of cabinet confidentiality. So this is just what the situation here needed, yet another confidential meeting that no one can really understand what's going on. in, and then she comes out and does a brief scrum and says that she's still talking to her lawyer. We talked about it last week. She's retained as counsel a former Supreme Court justice to guide her on what she can or cannot say, and at this point Trudeau is still not waiving solicitor-client privilege. So we've had some speculation raised that maybe she's angling to get back into cabinet. This is pure Twitter speculation. I don't buy it. I think it would look terrible on her, and it would just send a really, really bad message about a lot of the stuff that's gone on. And then we have the fact, however, that she is still seemingly playing ball with the Liberals, remaining in caucus and meeting with the cabinet. I mean, the meeting with cabinet is the particularly concerning part here, because you don't do that if you aren't in a position to at least have a frank dialogue with cabinet. And it shows there isn't perhaps as much of a schism as we might like to think. I'm going to read some other comments here before I carry on with what I'm thinking here. Melanie writes, Gerald Butts is a spin doctor. Don't forget how close he is to Justin. He's still going to be pulling strings from the sidelines. Well, you raise a point about the closeness of these two. I mean, this is not just some garden variety political aide that rose up through the ranks. This is a longtime friend of Trudeau's. They're jogging buddies. Their friendship goes back to McGill. Trudeau touts their continued friendship. So even if he's not occupying the role, I have no doubt in my mind that he is still going to be an advisor in some way. And this seems like such an amicable split. Again, this is why it's so bizarre that I wouldn't be surprised if Gerald Butts ended up as like campaign manager in 3 months or something by the time this is all blown over. Michelle writes, Jody Wilson-Raybould said she is still a Liberal. Can you talk a bit more about that? Sure, I don't know what more to say about it. She's still in the Liberal caucus. She resigned from cabinet, so that means that she's no longer in the ministry of Justin Trudeau's government. She is still going to be a Liberal member of Parliament. She sat with the Liberal caucus today. She identified in a media statement her part in the Liberal caucus, and she still has a Liberal website with red colors, and she still identifies with the Liberal policies. She's just not part of that core inner group of Liberals that's running the government, at least at this time. Now, will that remain? I don't know. Will she run as a Liberal in the next election? I don't know. Although, interestingly, there are people that are dropping. A lot of Liberal MPs have said they're not running, which is rare for a first-term majority government. Typically, you think that you're going to get a bit more life out of it, but you've had longtime Liberal stalwarts that are out, like John McCallum and Stéphane Dion and Scott Bryson and so on. And then today you had a Liberal MP from New Brunswick who said, I'm not running again. I think he was using the spending more time with family excuse. And that was very much surprising. Let's see what else. We got a message from Michelle. Michelle, again, is that just a cocky attitude from her, or is she trying to hint at something? No, I don't think she's hinting at anything. I think that she's just saying, yes, I'm still a Liberal. I don't think there's any hidden meaning to it. It's really just her saying, yeah, I'm still in this party, even if I'm not a part of the ministry itself. So she's no longer minister. She is still a Liberal MP. And there are a lot of people wondering if she's trying to angle to be back in it. And if she comes out with a statement that completely exonerates the government, which is what I think the worst case scenario for people that are hoping for transparency is here, there are going to be a lot of questions that need to be answered. Why did it take so long to do it? And I fear that the meeting she had with cabinet today was about negotiating something. I don't know if it was about a grilling. I don't know if it was a negotiation. I don't know if it was actually at her request or if it was at cabinet's request. But it does strike me as very odd given the circumstances. When you're out, you're out. I mean, Trudeau said he was baffled by her departure. Remember, her departure from cabinet came one day after Trudeau had made that comment about, clearly she's, clearly there's nothing wrong. If there was something wrong, she would have left cabinet. And well, then a day later, she called the bluff. So that's where I think that we're going to see some of the cracks form here. But let's look at some of the Liberal MPs who have spoken up in her defense, though. I mean, Navdeep Bains, who's an innovation minister, said, yeah, Wilson-Raybould needs to be able to appear before the Justice Committee. Wayne Long, a Liberal MP, was the one that said, yeah, she needs to testify first. Selena Caesar-Chavin, who's an MP from the Whitby area, she took to Twitter to endorse Wilson-Raybould, as did Jane Philpott. Not necessarily to say, I support her and not the Prime Minister, but just to say, this woman's great. So we're seeing MPs that are putting their neck on the line to take a stand in support of this woman who, let's face it, is fairly controversial right now in the context of Liberal politics and in the context of Canadian politics. And there was another story I wanted to pull up here that I think is a relevant one to talk about. And I had a quote that I wanted to extract from this. And I've had a few people in the chat bring this up as well, including Priscilla, who said that she wanted to hear about the case that was thrown out in Quebec. So one of the cases here that SNC-Lavalin is facing is about Stéphane Roy, who is a former vice president of the company. And a Quebec judge has thrown out the fraud and bribery charges against him after concluding the delays in his trial became unreasonable. Now, this was about the case of the $5,000 fraud over $5,000 for bribing Muammar Gaddafi's regime, charged in 2014, scheduled to begin in May, and his defense basically set a time limit on criminal proceedings. They used a provision of law that allows them. But the thing is, though, I don't know the intricacies of this case enough to weigh in on the decision itself. I'm also not a lawyer. But what I do know is that whenever any of these SNC-Lavalin decisions comes up, the question is always which case? Which case? Which Gaddafi case? Which bribery case? Which Libya case? The number of cases that are active and ongoing or recent about SNC-Lavalin is more than anyone can keep track of. And as far as this particular case goes, I don't know. The whole point is it's a company that has a proven track record of bribing and corruption. A proven track record of it, a convicted track record. I don't need to worry about a lawsuit because of how clear and unequivocal this company's connections to bribery and corruption practices have been. I think the big question becomes when we're looking at any given case, that's less significant than the overarching case, which is the one about this. So this is not throwing out the prosecution that is connected to the Jody Wilson-Raybould, Justin Trudeau PMO interference. This is one particular charge within that for one former executive, and that's Stéphane Roy. So it's not, as some people have suggested, that this is the whole thing going away. It's just one particular charge. And again, if there wasn't enough to convict, fine, it might have been the right call. But when all of this is coming out at once, it looks very bad. And there's no getting out of that. Karen writes, why was Jody in this closed-door caucus meeting this morning? Justin Trudeau said she wanted to meet with him. This is, I think, a great point, Karen. And this is why I mentioned earlier that it's possible, I'm open to the possibility that Wilson-Raybould might not be as cooperative with the public as she could be. When you meet in cabinet, you are meeting in closed doors. You cannot divulge what happens in a cabinet meeting. It's not allowed. Think of it as airtight as solicitor-client privilege. Whatever happens in a cabinet meeting is secret. So this meeting she goes into knowing is secret. Everyone there knows it's secret. It's possible that something may wind its way and leak out, but there's not going to be a recording of it. It's not going to be transparent. It's not going to be anything other than more of what we're hearing now, which is speculation, rumor, whispers, and all of that stuff. So did she want to go to tell them, hey, this is all what Trudeau did? I highly doubt it. The fact that she came out and still maintained a Liberal caucus role and affirmed that she is in the Liberal caucus suggests that this is not a woman who is taking a scorched earth or otherwise nuclear approach to this. And that's the whole point of this here. Roseanne writes, I don't think the court throwing out the case today and Jody Wilson-Raybould coming back is a coincidence. Well, it may or may not be. I don't think that Jody Wilson-Raybould is making her schedule in accordance with the Quebec court docket, but stranger things have happened, I guess. I think that all of this is happening at breakneck speeds. That's the whole point of this case right now. And Jody Wilson-Raybould is at some point going to have to be a lot more candid than she has been up until now. And I think that she'll soon find that people are losing patience if it starts to feel like she's holding back, because right now she seems like the victim. No one trusts Trudeau. She seems like the victim. That will go away very quickly if she doesn't own up to exactly what happened, and somewhat quickly. And again, if she's genuinely seeking legal advice, most people are probably wondering when that will end up. Surely her lawyer, who I don't know if he's working for free or billing by the hour, but a former Supreme Court justice, probably doesn't come too cheaply. I would like for us to finally hear from her side of things what happened. But if there is a negotiation underfoot, we're going to be left with what looks like a full-blown cover-up. And I know that for a lot of people, there will be no right answer, and there will be no believable answer here. Because let's go through the scenarios. She does the scorched earth thing. She comes out and says, Trudeau said this, Butts said this, Butts did this, I was pressured, I was strong-armed, it was anti-woman, it was anti-Indigenous, and, Trudeau is Hitler or something like that. I mean, if she does, levels every accusation there's going to be a constituency that believes her no matter what because they hate Trudeau, and then there's going to be a spin machine that's going to slander her, delegitimize her, and try to make it as though she's the bad guy. If she comes out with complete silence, people are going to start to feel that, all right, what are you not saying? What was your role in this? But the worst case scenario for people that want transparency here, I think, is if she works some sort of agreement out where she says, no, this was all a misunderstanding. There was this little interaction here that, maybe shouldn't have happened, but in retrospect, it was all fine. And I wish I could have cleared this up sooner, but solicitor-client privilege. Trudeau welcomes her back into open arms, says, yes, Ms. Wilson-Raybould resigned from cabinet while we sorted this out. She put the country first. We're glad to have her back, and all is well, sunny ways, hip, hip, hooray, because it's 2019. And in that scenario, we're looking at a full-blown cover-up. But here's the caveat. And again, maybe Gerald Butts is 4 steps ahead of all of us, but I highly doubt that. It still calls into question why Gerald Butts and Jody Wilson-Raybould resigned if, in fact, nothing happened. So the fact that these resignations happened, the fact that these resignations were accepted, suggests that someone in Ottawa thinks that they were relevant, especially Butts' resignation. Because for Butts to resign and have everyone say, oh, he's so great, he'll be missed, well, then why did you accept? I don't buy into this whole for king and country routine that he's doing where Gerald Butts gets up there and says, oh, but I'm, this is all false. I'll defend my name, but you know what? The country is more important than me. I agree. The country is a lot more important than him. I don't agree that he necessarily was working that into his legitimate rationale for why it was time to step aside. And this is huge. This is huge. This is absolutely huge for a case to have the chief advisor to Trudeau resign without any inclination of why, without anyone saying why, without him saying why, without Trudeau saying why. And I can't really think of anything analogous. Harper had these little scandals along the way where people left, people resigned, but there was always a very clear reason for why. There was always a very markedly clear reason for why a given person had to resign in the wake of a given scandal. And this doesn't make the questions go away. It doesn't. It only adds more questions to it. So if it was a calculation and not a genuine action, it was very much a miscalculation. And I think that will become apparent in the days ahead. Again, it's only Tuesday. This is the thing. We've already had like a week's worth of news in just a day here. It is only Tuesday. And I saw on Twitter, actually, I think it was yesterday, someone pointed out it was a whole month ago that John McCallum resigned as Canada's ambassador to China. A month ago. Doesn't that feel like a distant memory at this point? I think Jody Wilson-Raybould probably got a big, huge Valentine's Day card from John McCallum as a big thank you for now. His scandal just goes away. Who knows what Liberal will bring us a new scandal in a month's time, though. Folks, I just want to give a bit of a plug here, if I may. Give me a follow on Twitter, at Andrew Lawton. Follow me on Facebook. My page is in the box there, or if you're watching later, I think it's down there, or maybe it's up there, or maybe it's nowhere. I don't know. There's a box somewhere. If it has my name and it's blue, click on it, click like. Also, we need your support to keep the lights on. I realize they're not on right now, which is why it's dark. So we need a lot of support, apparently. You can head on over to truenorthinitiative.com and join the Andrew Lawton Heritage Club. We've got lots of clubs. The Andrew Lawton Club specifically gets me in your face as much or as little as you want. That was a terrible sales pitch. No one wants that. Okay, I'll leave. I'll get out of your way if you give us a few bucks a month to support our work. But in all seriousness, we can't do this without you. We are a grassroots group. Have to say farewell for now. More content throughout the week, and I'll be back with another True North report next week. For True North, I'm Andrew Lawton. Thank you. God bless, and good day, Canada.